In the heart of Portland, Oregon, USA, sat a modest, weather-beaten house that had once been the pride of the Smith family, the family of four. John, his wife Mary and their two children, Anna and Jason, had called it home for over a decade. The house had witnessed birthdays, Christmas mornings, and countless family dinners. It had been the backdrop for laughter, love, and the ups and downs of everyday life. But over the last few years, things began to unravel. John, a hard-working man who had always provided for his family, fell seriously ill. What began as a few missed days of work due to fatigue quickly turned into a full-blown health crisis. John was diagnosed with a rare, aggressive disease that required constant medical attention and costly treatments. Mary did her best to keep things together, working double shifts at her job as a grocery clerk, but it wasn't enough. The medical bills mounted, draining their savings and pushing them into a financial decline. As the months went by, rent payments became harder to meet. Despite their struggles, the Smiths had always paid on time until they couldn't. The landlord, Mr. Harper, had been patient at first, giving them time to catch up, but as their debt grew, so did his frustration. Mr. Harper was a small-time landlord who depended on rental income to pay his own bills, and he couldn't afford to carry their burden much longer. The final straw came when John's condition worsened, requiring a lengthy hospital stay with John unable to work and Mary barely holding on. The eviction notice came. They had 30 days to vacate, but the family had no plan, no place to go. They couldn't afford the rising rents in Portland, and the idea of moving out of the city seemed impossible. Yet, with no other options, they were forced to face the reality that they would lose the home that had been their sanctuary for years. As the eviction deadline loomed, the Smiths made a heart-wrenching decision. Late one evening, after the kids had gone to bed, John and Mary quietly packed up what little they could. The house was filled with memories, and each item they left behind felt like a piece of their hearts being torn away. The children's toys, dolls, trucks, and board games were left scattered in the living room. Anna's favorite book still lay open on her bed, while Jason's baseball glove sat on the kitchen counter, untouched. With no family nearby and shelters full, the Smiths had nowhere to turn. In the dead of night, they loaded their car with a few bags and drove away, abandoning the only home their children had ever known. They left a note for Mr. Harper, apologizing for their sudden departure and expressing deep regret for the rents they still owed. But they didn't have the strength to face him in person. They didn't have the strength to face anyone. When Mr. Harper arrived at the house the next day, he was met with silence. The house, once full of life, was now eerily still. The door, left unlocked, creaked open, and he stepped inside. What he saw left him frozen in place. Dishes were still in the sink, as though the family had left in the middle of dinner. Children's drawings hung on the refrigerator, reminders of happier days, but the rooms were empty of people, filled only with the heavy presence of loss. The abandonment hit Mr. Harper harder than he had expected. As a landlord, he had experienced tenant issues before, but this felt different. This wasn't just about money or missed rent. It was about a family falling apart, caught in circumstances beyond their control. He knew the Smiths had tried their best, but in the end, their best wasn't enough. And now, he stood in the empty house, the weight of their absence pressing down on him. For the next few months, the house remained vacant, a hollow reminder of the human toll behind the numbers and rental agreements. Neighbors wondered what had happened to the family. They had seen less and less of them over the past year, and now, they were simply gone. The mail piled up in the mailbox, addressed to names that no longer lived there. Grass grew tall in the front yard, and weeds began to take over, as if the house itself had given up hope. The Smiths had disappeared into the city, joining the ranks of Portland's growing population of displaced families. They moved from shelter to shelter, struggling to find stability. John's health continued to decline, and the stress of homelessness weighed heavily on Mary and the children. Anna, once a bright and happy child, grew quiet and withdrawn. Jason, always full of energy, became distant, barely able to focus in school. Mr. Harper eventually rented out the house to another family, but the memory of the Smiths haunted him. He couldn't shake the image of the empty rooms, the half-packed boxes, and the abandoned dreams. He knew that Portland, like many cities, was facing a housing crisis, and the Smiths were just one story among many, but to him, they weren't just tenants, they were people, caught in the grips of a failing system. The story of the Smith family's abandonment was a tragic reminder of the fragility of life. One illness, one unexpected crisis, and everything they had built was gone. The home that had once been their refuge now stood as a monument to their broken dreams, a symbol of how quickly stability can turn into despair. And as they drifted further from the life they had known, the question lingered: could they ever find their way back? Property and facility management perspective. From a property and facility management viewpoint, the story highlights several challenges and responsibilities: tenant screening and communication. The landlord, Mr. Harper, initially had a good relationship with the Smiths, but could have benefited from more consistent communication as the family's financial situation worsened. Maintaining regular dialogue with tenants, especially those facing hardships, can help property managers anticipate and potentially prevent abandonment situations. Maintenance and property upkeep. After abandonment, Mr. Harper faced a property in disrepair, with mail piling up and overgrown grass. Property managers must be prepared for the added costs and time required to restore abandoned properties to rentable condition. Immediate inspections and cleanups are critical in preventing property degradation and attracting new tenants. Financial risk management. Tenant abandonment can lead to significant financial losses for landlords, including unpaid rent and the cost of releasing. Property managers should have contingency plans in place, such as rental insurance or quicker turnaround strategies, to mitigate these risks. Moral perspective. The story presents deep moral concerns regarding the human aspect of eviction and tenant abandonment. Empathy and compassion. The landlord faced a difficult decision, but could have shown more compassion by working with the Smith family on alternative solutions before eviction. Offering more flexibility or connecting tenants to social services could have prevented the tragic outcome. Community support. The neighbors and society at large also have a moral responsibility to support families in crisis. Tenant abandonment highlights the lack of a safety net for vulnerable individuals. A stronger, community-based approach to helping struggling families could prevent such stories from repeating. Systemic failures. The story raises questions about societal and healthcare systems that allow families like the Smiths to fall through the cracks. Morally, there's a need for improved social welfare and healthcare safety nets to support families facing medical and financial crises. Legal perspective. From a legal standpoint, tenant abandonment introduces several important aspects of property law. Eviction process. Legally, the landlord followed due process by issuing an eviction notice. However, state laws require that landlords provide clear communication about tenants' rights and obligations, especially during financial hardship. Tenant protection laws, such as providing eviction notices and just cause for termination, must be strictly followed. Tenant abandonment protocols. After abandonment, the landlord must follow legal steps, such as conducting an official inspection, securing the property, and dealing with personal property left behind. In many states, landlords are required to store a tenant's belongings for a specific period before disposing of them. Unpaid rent and debt collection. The story highlights the legal complexities of collecting unpaid rent after tenant abandonment. Landlords can file lawsuits to recover unpaid amounts, but these cases can be costly and drawn out. Small landlords like Mr. Harper may find it challenging to recover losses, emphasizing the need for clear rental agreements with legal protections. Lessons learned. Human-centered property management. Landlords and property managers should approach tenant issues with empathy, considering the broader personal and financial challenges tenants face. A more proactive, supportive approach could prevent abandonment and promote better landlord-tenant relationships. Importance of financial planning for tenants. The story underscores the critical importance of having emergency savings and understanding the long-term financial implications of life events such as illness. For landlords, having reserves or rental insurance is essential to mitigate the risks of unpaid rent. Communication is key. Regular communication between landlords and tenants can help identify and address potential problems early, potentially avoiding abandonment. Open and compassionate dialogue, alongside payment plans, could offer solutions before eviction becomes the only option. The role of policy and support systems. The story exposes gaps in healthcare, housing assistance, and social services. Comprehensive policies that provide support for families facing financial crises, such as rent subsidies, eviction prevention programs, and healthcare coverage, are vital in preventing tenant abandonment. In conclusion, tenant abandonment is not just a property management issue, but a multifaceted problem involving legal obligations, moral considerations, and the broader societal responsibility to support vulnerable families. If you find this story enlightened, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to my channel for more content on property, facility, and real estate management business tips. Thank you for watching. See you in my next video. God bless you.